Will Kyoto Animation succeed in making this grand prize winning light novel into the next greatest anime? Well, I'm your host, Anime Sam, and here's everything you need to know about one of the most promising upcoming animes, Violet Evergarden.
お客様がお望みならどこでも駆けつけます。自動手記人形サービスバイオレット・エヴァーガーデンです。
Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to AniNews. So today I've decided to put together all the available information for the upcoming show Violet Evergarden from Kyoto Animation, as well as do a little analysis on the trailers that have been released so far. But before we can get into the trailers or the plot of Violet Evergarden, let's first start with how it got to where it is today. So Violet Evergarden is a light novel written by Kana Akatsuki and illustrated by Akiko Takase. In 2014, the novel was entered into the Kyoto Animation Awards program, which is basically an annual competition-like event that started in 2009. The event involves the studio judging public manga, scenario, and novel submissions for which winning submissions have a chance of being adapted into an anime. Examples of submissions that have become anime in the past would be Free and Kyokai no Kanata, or in English, Beyond the Boundary. However, in the 5 years that the awards program has been running, there have only ever been honorable mentions, but never a grand prize winner. But that wasn't until Violet Evergarden was entered in 2014 and became the first ever grand prize winner at the event. Even now, Violet Evergarden remains the only submission to receive a grand prize award for any of the 3 categories of manga, scenario, and novel. But what made Violet Evergarden such a good novel to become the only entrant in 7 years to receive the grand prize award? Well, this is what the judges had to say about it. The grand prize work shook the hearts of the judges and made me feel energy that makes me think that I want to publish this work to the world and I want many people to read this work. This is a work suitable for our first grand prize. The writing clearly and simply conveys the author's message as well as allows the reader to imagine the character's emotions and scenes. It makes a strong case. Its appeal draws the reader in and makes them want to finish it all in one sitting. Connected with how it strongly moved a lot of our judges, it was elected to win the grand prize. So clearly, this novel has received a lot of praise from a pretty tough crowd, and as a result, received its own anime adaptation. And let me tell you, with a studio like Kyoto Animation backing a creation like this definitely has the potential to be the next god tier anime. Like, I'm not talking great anime like Hibike or Shinsekai, I mean to be one of the best, right up there with Code Geass and Steins Gate. So now I'm going to start to loop the 2 trailers that Kyoto Animation has so kindly graced our eyes with, so that you can get a feel for the type of anime that we're dealing with here. But before I go through these trailers scene by scene and some frame by frame, I'd like to first read to you what the plot of this anime is supposed to be. So apparently, the story revolves around auto memory dolls. These dolls were created initially by a scientist named Professor Orland to assist his blind wife in writing her novels. These dolls were later rented out to other people who needed their services. While the main functions of these auto memory dolls is to generate voices into text, a second group of people created a company that rented out beautiful talented women who, while having the same function as the original auto memory dolls, also can perform military related tasks. There's a quote here now. "I will run as fast as I can to wherever my customer desires. I am the auto memories doll, Violet Evergarden." A girl who almost appears to have popped out of a fairy tale, with her blonde hair and blue eyes, said this with her inorganic beauty and sweet voice. Now, when Violet Evergarden's website was first released about a year or so ago, they released character designs with very brief descriptions of what is most likely to be the characters in the show. So pay attention to these descriptions because they'll be more relevant during my actual analysis of the trailer. So first off, we're given the design for Violet, which is the name for the auto memory doll and how I will be referring to her from now on. The description, when translated, reads, "An auto memories doll that works at CH Mail Services. Her owner, who doesn't match her beauty at all, has unparalleled fighting power. Gilbert found her when he was a child, so she has served as a soldier in the past." So here we see the mention of a man named Gilbert, but first we are presented with the character of Hodgins. He is described as the president of CH Mail Services and a former soldier for Leidenstadt Licht. I'm not even going to try to say that, so his description when translated reads, "He's Violet's guardian. A dandy guy who loves gambling. Though their personalities are different, he's been friends with Gilbert for a long time." So now we get to see who this Gilbert character is. He's mentioned to be a soldier in that country's army, and also plays a parent role for Violet, whom he received from his older brother. So basically, we have what I believe to be is the 3 main characters. Violet, who is the auto memory doll created by Professor Orland, mainly for the function of speech to text, However, she is gifted to Gilbert by his older brother at a very young age, and since Violet was mentioned to be a soldier, that means that she followed him through his military services. Then we have Hodgins, who most likely met Gilbert through the army, and now takes care of Violet for Gilbert since he's a former soldier. We were also given 5 sub-characters, each appearing in their own short story. However, I'll identify them as we see them in the first trailer, because they seem to be more prevalent there. Alright, now that I've given you all the readily available information on the show, let's go through the trailers and start connecting the dots based on what we see. Also, since this analysis is going to be based on my opinion and not fact, let me know in the comments below what you think about a particular scene and whether you agree or disagree with my observations. Oh, and if you're not watching in 1080p, then do yourself a favor and switch to that right now, because anything else just doesn't do the scenes justice. So let's begin. Here we get our very first look at Violet. You see she is clearly typing words in the typewriter, which just so happens to be written in English, and they say one day, daddy, one day, I will show. The typewriter then proceeds to dismantle itself while the paper is flown off screen and then folded into an envelope. At this point, you can already notice the amount of detail that is being put into something as simple as this short promo video. Each component is well designed and the letters from the typewriter flow smoothly in and out of shots on the screen. But this short scene also helps us to identify the time period at which the anime may take place. The next scene transitions to a scenic outdoor location with Violet twirling while golden letters and cherry blossoms float around in the fore and background. I want you to take notice of the amount of detail that went into making this scene feel realistic. Even though it is only 3 seconds long, you can notice the wind as it causes not only Violet's hair to flow, but also the pond in the background to ripple. Then, as the shot pans out, we get our first look at who I believe to be as Oscar. He is the first protagonist from the short, the author, and the Auto Memories doll. And he's a writer that can't write anymore, but has gifted Violet and her writing services for a period of 3 days to help encourage him to be able to write again. This would make sense with the first scene because Violet was using the typewriter. So then the scene transitions through the use of the same envelope that we saw in the initial scene, which may have more significance than we think, but I'll explain that later. So now we have Violet in what looks to be like a maid outfit in a bedroom with the same golden letters floating around in the fore and background again. But there's also the little girl who I'm pretty sure is Anne from the second short, The Young Girl and the Auto Memories doll. She's a young girl who becomes jealous when her mother rents Violet to help write something. So this is clearly how the scene is being depicted in the trailer, and this is obviously from a time period from when Violet was still being used for her base purpose. But I just want to point out here too, that as the camera pans from right to left, how the sun is animated with different lightings and glare depending on the point of the camera in the room. Now the scene transitions with the use of the same envelope to Violet in some sort of lamp store while looking closely at a pendant which we see her wearing in the previous scene with Anne, but not in the first scene with Oscar. What's also significant with this scene is the fact that Violet is wearing what looks to be like a military outfit. Then the envelope comes into scene again to transition us to a new scene from what could potentially be Violet's time serving in the military. So at this point, you can definitely tell that there's a consistent theme of having those same golden letters in the fore and background. But in this particular scene, there's glass shards floating everywhere as well. This scene is also a little weird because of the outfit that Violet's wearing. She appears to have her military jacket hanging off of her arms, but the rest of her outfit is just bandages across her whole body. So I think it'd be pretty interesting to see what part of the story this particular scene is from. The scene proceeds to zoom in on Violet's face, then very briefly uses the envelope to transition to a scene of mayhem, where the golden letters are now on fire, and Violet can be seen carrying who I believe to be Aiden. He's from the third short story called The Boy and the Auto Memories doll, and he's a soldier that encounters Violet while on a mission. We then get a close-up of Violet's face, and this next part I wouldn't have noticed unless I did a frame-by-frame analysis of the trailer. But there's a brief moment where we see the envelope, which by this point we know represents a transition to a different story or time. And now we get a very brief glimpse of the face of a character who I believe to be is Edward, who appears in the fifth short, The Prisoner and the Auto Memories doll. He is said to have prior knowledge of Violet and her owner, and is apparently a giant prick. So, those were all the additional characters from this trailer. The scene then proceeds to transition back to Violet on the same typewriter that we saw during the initial scene. But this time, the envelopes that have been following us throughout the duration of the trailer are now floating everywhere. So this leads me to believe that this show is going to be one big story about Violet's life, in which each episode or couple of episodes covers a different short story, which was basically a chapter from her life. We saw 3 or 4 scenarios with Violet, each vastly different from the last, however all correlating to the short stories that I identified earlier. So perhaps this show will display bits and pieces of Violet's past, eventually building up to how she got to where she is in the present. the present, which I assume to be working for Hodgins at a mail company, because the consistent element throughout the entirety of the trailer was that envelope as a transition element. So if that's how it actually goes down, I think it'd be pretty cool to see flashbacks that lead to one overarching story, all giving us more information on Violet's life and who she is as a character. And it's just the cherry on top that Kyoto Animation is giving us a visual masterpiece already. But there's one more thing about the trailer that I want to talk about as well. So throughout the trailer there was a short song with English lyrics playing in the background. And I'll play it once for you here so that you can hear the entire thing yourself.
Time heals the sorrows. Get love and no worries. 'Cause nothing is more precious than a noble, faithful. She's as pure as the driven snow. Oh, dear heart, so sweet.
So now that you've heard it, what I thought the lyrics were was time heals the sorrows, gain love and no worries, 'cause nothing is more precious than love, noble, faithful, she's as pure as that driven snow, oh dear heart so sweet. Although it may not seem like much, I believe this song gives more information on Violet as a character and the era that the show takes place in. It's the lyric pure as the driven snow that stands out the most because that is an old British idiom meaning entirely pure, which matches the Victorian theme but also relates to Violet's character. So this is personal opinion, but I'm assuming that they're referring to how Violet began as this pure creation to help people with their problems, like writing and whatnot. But as time went on, they began attempting to militarize her. So Violet, being this doll that changes owners as time goes on, most likely builds these relationships with people from her days pre and post military, resulting in both sorrows and love, but that's just how I interpreted it. Alright, so that's going to be everything for the first trailer. And I was planning on putting my analysis of the second trailer in this video as well, but due to time constraints and the fact that I haven't uploaded in like 4 or 5 days, I really just wanted to get this out. So I'll do a second video for my analysis on the second trailer, because that on its own has a lot of stuff that I could talk about, which relates heavily back to some of my findings in this video. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm curious to know what you guys think about this anime, so let me know in the comments below. I honestly think this might be the next biggest anime if done right. Like, it won the only grand prize ever from Kyoto Animation, so that must give it some merit, right? But anyways, as always, thanks for watching, and if you want to see more of this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So until next time, ciao. Oh, also, who did it better? Mob Psycho 100 versus One Punch Man should be this weekend. Like, for real this time.